So what happened is that about 10 days ago, the recovery trial actually looked at their data. They did an interim data analysis, and their data safety monitoring board suggested that there is no benefit because they had enrolled enough numbers to be able to analyze hydroxychloroquine versus those who had standard of care, and they said that there was no benefit in mortality seen, which was the endpoint used. What is clear now is hydroxychloroquine does not seem to have, or does not have, we know for sure now, does not have an impact on the disease course, on mortality in hospitalized COVID-19 patients. Where there is still a gap is, does it have any role at all in prevention or in minimizing the severity of the illness in early infection or even in preventing infection? We don't know that as yet. And we need to complete those large trials and get the data. So again, we have a definitive answer on that. As a global community, what do we want? We want clear answers to these questions. We want to know whether a drug reduces mortality or not. And if it doesn't, does it have any other beneficial effects like reducing hospitalization or the need for ventilation? If those benefits are there, then we want patients to get it. But if there aren't, we want everybody to know that there's no point in continuing. So we have the same situation with lopinavir, ritonavir now, which we will be looking at, and then deciding on whether we should change the other arms in the trial. But we will come to that later. Currently, we know that the recovery trial, which I said is very similar to the Solidarity trial, is also enrolling patients in to lopinavir, ritonavir. So between Solidarity and recovery, we've already enrolled about, I think, over 3,000 patients into the lopinavir, ritonavir arm, and similar number into standard of care. So this is already a huge number and should be enough to tell us whether this drug is actually having a mortality benefit or a benefit in reducing the severity of the illness. So we're entering a new phase now of vaccine trials, the phase 3 trials, which are the ones that will definitively prove whether a vaccine is efficacious and safe. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, but vaccine development is a complex undertaking. It comes with a lot of uncertainty. The good thing is we have many different vaccine candidates and platforms. So even if the first one fails or the second fails, we shouldn't lose hope. We shouldn't give up. So WHO is working on a fair allocation mechanism, which we're discussing with our member states to see, can countries all come to an agreement on how you share a limited supply of vaccine? Let's say you have 50 or 100 million doses at the end of this year. Okay, how should the world share that? Should it go only to the countries which have paid for it or are capable of paying for it to cover their own populations? Or should it go to protect frontline health workers or the most vulnerable people, whether they are the elderly or whether they are people with other diseases? And certainly frontline workers, health workers, but also other kinds of first responders are at the highest risk, as we've seen, unfortunately.
Everyone is wondering when the coronavirus pandemic will come to an end. The truth is, it probably won't be over until we have a vaccine. The good news is that there are more than 40 vaccine projects currently in the works. The bad news is that it could take 12 to 18 months or even longer to bring a vaccine to market. That's a lot longer than we would like, but it's much faster than the 5, 10, or even 20 years that many vaccines take to come out. So why does it take so long? First, researchers need to develop a candidate vaccine. This can take years. Vaccines kickstart the immune system by teaching our bodies to recognise the virus. In response, our immune systems create antibodies, so the next time we get exposed to the virus, we can fight it off without ever getting ill. It's a simple idea, but developing a vaccine that works isn't easy. even though we've been doing it since 1796, when English doctor Edward Jenner noted that milkmaids who caught cowpox didn't get as sick from smallpox. Jenner's revelation led to the first generation of vaccines which use weakened or dead versions of the virus. 200 years later, we have a new generation of vaccines that might be the quickest way for us to tackle coronavirus. These use a tiny bit of a virus's genetic information to trick our own cells into making bits of the virus and triggering an immune response. These are called mRNA vaccines, and they could be much quicker to develop and manufacture than traditional vaccines. That's why researchers are already using this approach to develop a potential coronavirus vaccine. But even once we've got a candidate vaccine, it will still need to go through extensive tests before it's jabbed into our arms. The candidate is tested on animals such as mice, rabbits, and primates. Animal trials for the Ebola vaccine took 4 years before it was finally approved in 2019. Then there are human trials. These take a long time. These trials are usually split into 3 or more phases. First, the vaccine is given to a small number of healthy people to see if it's safe and behaves in the way we expect. This can take 2 years, but the current coronavirus trials hope to cut it to 3 months. The second phase is a randomised trial with hundreds of participants to see if the vaccine is effective at doing what it's meant to do. This usually takes 3 years, but may be cut to 8 months. The third and final phase sometimes involves thousands of participants. This is when we identify the right dose and possible side effects. It normally takes another few years, but it could be combined with the second phase to save time. American biotech firm Moderna is running animal trials alongside human trials for its coronavirus vaccine, and in mid-April, a team at the University of Oxford started human trials for its own vaccine. If a vaccine clears these hurdles, regulators will then examine the data and decide on approval. That can take years, but in this case, regulators are ready to act much more quickly. Once we've found our vaccine, we need to make lots of it. Most flu vaccines are grown over 6 months in chicken eggs, 1 jab per egg. In fact, the US government has a secret stash of chickens in case it needs to quickly manufacture lots of flu vaccine. But this new coronavirus probably can't replicate inside eggs, so we need to find another way. Because mRNA vaccines leave it to our bodies to produce the viral proteins, manufacturing them should be faster. But it's never been done before. Bill Gates Foundation is funding factories for 7 candidate vaccines, saying it's worth spending billions now to be ready to start production even if only 1 vaccine is successful. And then there's packaging and storage. The Ebola vaccine had to be stored at -80 degrees Celsius or even colder, so containers powered by jet fuel had to be developed. And medical teams normally roll out vaccinations, but we've never had to vaccinate the entire world at once before. Regardless of such heroic efforts, we aren't likely to see a vaccine before 2021, so we may have to continue some form of social distancing if coronavirus epidemics continue to break out. Life probably isn't going to go back to normal for another year or even longer. In the meantime, we're just going to have to be patient